The thing about being found by someone you thought was gone is that you don't always recognize it as something good at first. Your body gets there before your brain does. You're standing in a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning holding a cup you've already paid for, and a voice behind you says your full name first and last, the way only certain people say it, people who learned it before you knew how to introduce yourself, and something in your chest does something it hasn't done in 10 years. Then you turn around. Then you understand. My name is Marcus Webb. I was 32, a high school history teacher in Raleigh, North Carolina, which meant I spent my days helping 16-year-olds understand that the past was not a fixed thing but a living argument, that the reasons people did what they did were always more complicated than the chapter summary suggested. I was reasonably good at this. I was less good at applying it to my own history, where the complications tended to stay complications regardless of how many ways I tried to read them. I had grown up in a small city in eastern Tennessee. Not small enough that everyone knew everyone, but small enough that the people who mattered to you when you were young were the same 12 or 15 people, and when they disappeared from your life the way people disappeared when families moved and schools changed, the hole they left had a specific shape. Not general loss, precise loss. I had moved to Raleigh at 22 for a teaching position and had been building a life there ever since. A good apartment. Work I believed in. A close group of people who had become the kind of friends you collect slowly in your 30s. Not the frantic social construction of your 20s, but something quieter and more deliberate. I had been in one serious relationship in that decade, 2.5 years, with a woman named Andrea who was kind and intelligent, and who eventually said, with real care, that she felt like she was always slightly on the outside of something in me that I had never fully explained. She was not wrong. I didn't know, at the time, how to explain it. I wasn't entirely sure I knew what it was. I knew after the coffee shop on a Tuesday. Her name was Nora Ellison. We had grown up 4 houses apart on the same street in Greenfield, Tennessee, from the time we were 7 until we were 15, and her family moved to Charlotte when her father's company transferred him and she disappeared from my life, in the way people disappear when you are 15 and don't yet know how to hold on to things. We had been inseparable in that particular way, that children are inseparable when they live close enough to appear at each other's back door without calling first, when they spend summer afternoons turning a specific corner of someone's backyard into a country or a planet or a headquarters, when they have a private vocabulary of references and jokes that exists only between the two of them and is meaningless to everyone else. Her thing was stories. She wrote them in composition notebooks that she kept in a specific spot under her bed. She told me this once like it was a great secret, which it was, and she would read them to me sometimes, sitting in the old oak tree in my backyard that was perfect for sitting in, the one branch that was broad and flat enough to hold 2 people without either of them working at it. I was a good listener then. I am still. It was one of the few things that transferred intact across the decade. When she left, she cried in my driveway. I didn't know what to do with that. I was 15 and I stood there and I said something useless like, "We'll talk all the time." And she nodded, and we meant it, and then life did what life does, and the calls got less frequent, and then the emails did, and then one day there was just the absence, which was its own kind of presence. I thought about her sometimes, not obsessively, just specifically, the way you think about someone whose chapter felt unfinished. The coffee shop was called Provisions. I went on Tuesdays because it was on the way to the school from my apartment, and the Tuesday barista made a cortado that was exactly right in a way that I had stopped trying to articulate to other people. She was in line behind me. I didn't see her until after I'd ordered and stepped to the side to wait, and then her voice said my name, Marcus Webb, and something in my chest did the thing. I turned around. She was taller than I remembered, which is always a strange thought about someone you met at 7 and last saw at 15. Her hair was darker, shorter, cut close on one side in a way that looked like a decision. She was wearing a coat the color of smoke and carrying a leather bag over one shoulder and looking at me with an expression that was half recognition and half something more private than that, something she had been holding the shape of for a long time and was now setting down. "Nora," I said. "Hi," she said, which sounds like nothing, but the way she said it, the weight she put in it, the complete quiet of it, it was not nothing at all. We took our drinks to a table by the window. Outside, Raleigh moved through itself in the particular way of a Tuesday morning, unhurried, purposeful, people with somewhere to be and no special urgency about getting there. Inside, we sat across from each other and did the thing you do when someone returns from a decade's absence: the accounting. Jobs, cities, the outline of what had happened in the years between. She was a novelist, published 2 books, working on a third. She had moved to Raleigh 8 months ago for a writer's residency at NC State and had been meaning, she said, she looked at the table when she said this, to look me up. Meaning to, I said. Meaning to, she said. And then I was in line and you were there. How did you know I was in Raleigh? She looked at me. A small pause, honest about its own weight. I looked you up, she said. 4 years ago, maybe 5. I found your school's faculty page. Another pause. I thought about emailing, but I didn't know what the first sentence would be, she said, and I couldn't start without knowing the first sentence. I looked at her across the table. The cortado was the right temperature. Outside, a bus went by. What was it, I said. The first sentence if you'd written it. She wrapped both hands around her cup. I don't know, she said. Something like, I've been wondering if you're okay. The simplicity of it landed harder than she probably intended. I'm okay, I said. I know, she said. You look okay. Something moved across her face. You look exactly like yourself. We stayed in that coffee shop for 2 hours. The Tuesday barista refilled her cup twice without being asked, which I took as a form of institutional endorsement. She talked about the books. The first one, a novel about a family in eastern Tennessee, which she had written in a furnished room in Portland over 18 months, while working a day job she described as professionally beige. The second one, stranger and harder to categorize, which had done better than the first. The third, which she was currently in the middle of and which was not behaving. Not behaving how? I said. The character won't do what I planned, she said. I know what she's supposed to do and she keeps choosing something else, and I keep having to follow her. Is that bad? She considered this seriously. It means she's real, she said. Real people don't do what you planned, they do what they have to do. A pause. It's inconvenient, but it usually means the book is working. I thought about that for a long time after. The character who wouldn't do what was planned. She asked about the teaching. I told her about the history classes, the particular quality of attention that students gave or withheld, and what you could do with it when you had it. The year I'd spent fighting a curriculum revision that would have removed 2 units on labor history and what it had taken to win. You fought for it, she said. It mattered, I said. Did you win? We kept both units, I said, and lost the field trip budget for 3 years. She smiled at that. A real one, nothing performed about it. That sounds exactly like you, she said. You don't know what I'm like anymore, I said. Not unkindly, just accurate. She looked at me with a directness that I had forgotten was a thing she did. Some things don't change, she said. You cared about what was true when you were 10. You still care about what's true. I didn't have an answer for that. That's not a bad thing, she said, reading whatever was on my face. It's the thing I always... She stopped. Started again. It's a good thing. We exchanged numbers at the door and she said she'd love to get dinner sometime. Not performing casualness, but genuinely casual. And I said yes, and meant it, and walked to school with the specific altered quality of a morning that had delivered something unexpected before 9 o'clock. I taught 2 sections of AP United States history that day, and spent the 3rd period's lecture on Reconstruction distracted by a sensation I didn't immediately name, something that was not quite nostalgia, because nostalgia is passive, and this was active. Something that was not quite anticipation, because that implies you know what you're moving toward. Something like recognition, the sense of a thing that had been categorized as lost, turning out to be somewhere it had always been. We had dinner that Friday at a restaurant she had already been to and liked, which I noted as an act of quiet competence. She didn't suggest somewhere new and hope for the best. She brought me somewhere she already knew was good. The restaurant was small, northern Italian, the kind of place where the lighting is low and the noise level is calibrated so that 2 people can have a real conversation without leaning in. She ordered in a way that suggested she had thought about it before she arrived. I found this specific quality, the thinking before arriving, deeply familiar, because she had always been like this, even as a child. Even playing in the backyard, she had a plan. We talked through the first course about the residency, the strange productivity of living in an unfamiliar place with your whole job being to write, the way routine could become a trap if you let it settle too early. Then she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes," I said. "What happened with the person you were with? I saw something on. I wasn't trying to look. You came up in a suggested." She stopped. "Never mind how. I saw that you were with someone, and then you weren't. 3 or 4 years ago." I looked at her. The directness still did the same thing it always had. Cut through the layers that most people's questions left intact. We broke up because she said she felt like she was always on the outside of something I hadn't explained, I said. She was right. Nora was quiet for a moment. What was the thing? I picked up my wine glass and set it down again. I'm still working that out, I said. She looked at me with an expression that was careful and kind, and not quite satisfied. Okay, she said. You don't have to answer. I think, I said slowly, it was that I'd filed certain things under gone, and they were still taking up space. And the space it took up, it made it hard to be fully somewhere. She went very still. Things, she said. Not a question. The word landed precisely. Things, I said. Then, people. The table was quiet for a moment. Outside, the city moved. Marcus, she said, and her voice had changed slightly, careful with something it was holding. I never forgot you. I want you to know that. The whole 10 years. She looked at the table. I thought about looking you up 100 times. I told myself it was too long, too complicated, that you had a whole life. She looked up. And then I was standing behind you at a coffee counter, and my body said your name before I made a decision about it. The whole 10 years, something in my chest tightened. There it was. Neither of us said anything substantial for a moment. The waiter came and went. Someone laughed at the table behind us. Then I said, when you left, when you moved, I stood in the driveway and said all the right things, and didn't say the one true thing. What was the true thing, she said. That I didn't know what I was going to do without you, I said. That you were the person I told things to, and I didn't have another person like that, and I wasn't sure I would. I paused. I was 15. I didn't have the words for it. I just had the feeling. She was looking at me with her eyes very bright. Did you find another person like that? She said. Quiet. No, I said. I found good people. I found a person I loved and treated poorly through absence, without knowing I was doing it. I looked at her. I didn't find another you. She breathed out slowly. Then she picked up her wine and took a sip and set it down, and looked at the restaurant around us with the expression of someone taking inventory of a moment, filing it correctly. Okay, she said. Just that. But her hand crossed the table and rested beside mine. Not on it yet, not quite, just close enough that the warmth was there, and I turned my hand and she took it, and we sat like that through the second course and the third and the slow walk through the bill, and when we got outside to the street she stood beside me in the October night air, and I said her name. She looked up. I'm glad you said it, I said. In the coffee shop, whatever made you say it. I wasn't going to, she said. And then I thought, 10 more years, or say the name. She tilted her head slightly. It wasn't a hard choice. We did not rush after that. People who have lost 10 years to a silence they both made contributions toward don't rush. They move carefully, like someone walking on new ice, not from doubt but from the understanding that the thing beneath them is worth the patience. She finished the residency in March and stayed. The book that wouldn't behave was finished in April. She sent me the last page from her apartment at 11:30 at night, just the page number, no message, and I understood it was an invitation to call, so I called, and we talked about the ending for an hour and a half, and she said it was the first time she'd talked through an ending out loud before the book was turned in, and it felt like it was supposed to. I told her about the student who had come back to visit in January, a girl I'd had in AP History 3 years earlier, who said she'd written her college thesis on labor history and had gotten into a PhD program, and that the 2 units I'd fought to keep were the units that made her decide. Nora went quiet on the phone. Marcus, she said. Yeah, that's the whole thing, isn't it? What you do. A pause. You hold on to the things that matter and you don't let them go, even when it costs you. I didn't say anything. I want you to know, she said, that I'm not going anywhere. I've been gone once and I know what it costs. Her voice was careful and very certain. I'm not doing it again. Not because circumstances had changed. Not because the logistics had aligned. Because she had decided. There is a difference. And she knew the difference. And I knew it too. We are not dramatic people. Our life together looks mostly like work and reading, and the particular ease of two people who have already lost each other once and are now handling what they have with the appropriate care. She writes in the morning. I plan my classes in the evening. We cook on Sundays, usually something that takes longer than it needs to because neither of us is in a hurry. Last week she showed me the dedication page of the new book. She had been vague about it for months, said she hadn't decided, said she was still thinking, looked sideways when I asked. The dedication said, "For M, who waited without knowing he was waiting." I stood in her kitchen with the page in my hand. She was watching me from the doorway. "That's not how it felt," I said. "I know," she said. "That's how it looked." I set the page down on the counter. I crossed to where she was standing. "For what it's worth," I said, "I would have waited longer." She put her hand on my face and looked at me the way she had looked at me in the coffee shop on that Tuesday morning, the first morning, like she was setting something down that she had been carrying for a long time. "I know," she said. "That's why I came back." Have you ever had someone from your past come back into your life at exactly the moment you could finally understand why they'd never really left? And have you ever had someone say your name and felt your body recognize it before your mind could catch up? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one found you at the right time, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.